Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and today we'll be breaking down all 15 Week 5 matchups. That's right, 15. We got the Packers and the Detroit Lions on a bye week, but want to focus on providing you all with some actionable fantasy football takeaways. I hope everyone had a great time watching some football over that Week 4. Nice little double header on Monday night, but we are on to Week 5 and focusing on making improvements and hopefully making some money and getting some wins in the oncoming week. So joining me today is PFF analyst and regular contributor to this very podcast, Andrew Erickson. Andrew, how's it going, man?
Ian, I'm doing pretty good. The Patriots suffered a big loss yesterday. I wasn't pleased with the quarterback play. My guy Edelman definitely dropped the ball, if that's the best way to put it. But it's a new week, and I'm ready for it.
New week. You got it, man. So as we go through the games, I'll list the matchup, spread, and game total. Andrew and I will each give a fantasy take. We'll move on to the next. Obviously, we're recording this at 1:30 p.m. ET on a Tuesday, so still plenty of time throughout the week to more fully form our opinions. But, thought this would be a good way, getting familiar with the week and learn some helpful fantasy nuggets as we go. So without further ado, starting off with the Thursday night matchup, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Chicago Bears. Buccaneers opened as -3 favorites. They are up to 5.5. Over-under staying pretty steady at 44.5. The big story here from Tampa Bay is just the amount of injuries that they had coming out of that Chargers game last week. I mean, just on the Monday injury report alone, Mike Evans didn't practice due to a sprained ankle. Leonard Fournette's still not practicing due to an ankle. Chris Godwin's not practicing with a hamstring. LaShawn McCoy's not practicing with an ankle. Scotty Miller isn't practicing with a hip and groin injury. Justin Watson has a chest injury. He's not practicing. OJ Howard's on IR with an Achilles issue. And even Mr. Rob Gronkowski was limited with the shoulder. So not all these guys are going to miss the game. I mean, Monday's on, a Thursday night game. It's more or less just a glorified walkthrough. So I wouldn't worry too much about this as long as some of these guys can get limited by the end of the week. But, there was a brief stretch in that game last week where Mike Evans hurt his ankle. He left the game. And, I had to tweet out the Spider-Man meme looking at the 2019 Patriots offense compared to 2020's Buccaneers offense when you don't have Evans and Godwin. I mean, look, when you don't have your top 2 wide receivers, any offense is going to look much worse. So this isn't, an indictment on Brady or anyone. It's not going to be hard for anyone to overcome that. So, Brady just threw 5 touchdowns. He looked great doing so. I mean, the deep balls look good all season, but, just make sure you keep an eye on his injury report because if, half these guys are not playing, it's going to be a very different target distribution and potentially very different production than we're used to. Andrew, what do you got in the Bears?
So looking at the Bears, you got David Montgomery, right? So he's kind of like slotted into that RB2 spot. You don't love him. We don't love Montgomery's upside really on a week-to-week basis. He's getting all the carries. And again, you don't love him in this spot. The Buccaneers defense has been pretty good against running backs. They've allowed the second fewest rushing yards to running backs this season. But again, the thing that I looked at that was encouraging from his usage last week, Tariq Cohen was out. So the question kind of going in was, all right, so do we see Cordarrelle Patterson? I know he's your guy. Do we see him in an expanded role, or do we see Montgomery more involved in the passing game? And even though his route or his targets didn't really pop off the page, he had 3 targets, which was kind of what his norm was over the past few weeks of the season. He took a massive jump in routes run. So he was under about 20 per game during the first 3 weeks, and that jumped up all the way to 35 in week 4, which actually ranks second behind only Allen Robinson. So you kind of have this distribution of targets where it's Allen Robinson, and you kind of have Anthony Miller / Darnell Mooney kind of working in, but then Montgomery is there, and you don't have to worry about, a lot of times we're seeing this with mobile quarterbacks. They don't throw the ball to the running back position. Nick Foles is a statue. He's going to throw it to the running backs. He's not going to break off and try to scramble and get yardage. That's not his game. We got 2 statue quarterbacks in this game, which is rare to find on prime time. So I think that David Montgomery, the rushing match doesn't look great, but I think he's going to be able to get it done with just enough volume and work in the passing game to be at worst an RB2 in this spot.
Yeah, I said last week going into week 4, as much as I, the self-pronounced president of the Cordarrelle Patterson fan club, wanted to think that CP would see that role increase with Tariq Cohen out of the picture. Didn't expect it to happen. It ended up not happening. So negative game script last week could very well be more ahead. Moving on, we got the Cincinnati Bengals at the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens are 13.5-point favorites. Over under is set at 51.5. So, another running back that really had some nice week 4 usage was Mr. Joe Mixon. 6 receptions were the second highest mark of his career, most since 2018. And Giovanni Bernard, only 13 snaps. That's the second fewest he's had in a single game over the last 2 years. And okay, the Bengals were able to get out with the lead ahead of the Jaguars, but it wasn't like this was some, 3 touchdown beatdown from the second quarter on or anything. And Mixon did really help them build that lead and then maintain the lead and, on the way to getting Joey Burrow's first career win. So the question is, will it continue? Because this is a good game to find out, if he's going to keep that negative game script as nearly 2 touchdown underdogs. I think more than anything, I mean, obviously you're not taking Mixon off the bench, but just realize that this guy truly is functioning as one of the more talented running backs in the league right now. I mean, only Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire have more yards after contact than Mixon. So hellacious spot. I get it. But you know what? Antonio Gibson last week was able to put up some numbers against Baltimore, thanks in large part to his receiving usage. Same thing with Clyde Edwards-Helaire the week before. Sneaky spot. You look at, I've been looking at the DraftKings pricing a little bit early this week, and in that kind of lower 6,000 range, you're seeing Mixon's price tag, really taking a beating because of this matchup. But look, people, if he's going to keep getting this sort of pass down work, in addition to the 15, 20 plus carries per game we already knew he had, this is everything we're looking for in a matchup proof RB1. Andrew, what you got with the Ravens?
So this running backfield, right? This is a puzzle that we're trying to figure out. And I got to first issue an apology, and it's going to go to Gus Edwards. You called me out on Ian, last week in our Slack channel. Basically, I had pulled a stat about yards per carry after contact, and I had excluded Gus Edwards because he didn't fit the criteria of 20 rushing attempts. So that's been updated, and now he has over 20 rushing attempts, and he leads the NFL in yards after contact per attempt. So Gus Edwards is back in the heart of me as an analyst, and he also ranks third in PFF rushing grade. So Gus Edwards is in, it's weird to think of a guy like him in a smash spot, but with the Ravens such heavy favorites at home, and even they talked about it on the broadcast. They talked about Gus Edwards. They said he's the closer. He is the guy that they want in the 8th, 9th inning to come in and just run over teams in garbage time. And that's what this game projects to be. It's a guessing game when we look at, okay, is it going to be a Dobbins game? Is it going to be Ingram? Ingram got the touchdown last week, but last week the Edwards led the team in carries. He had 9 carries. He led the team in snap percentage as well. So it's not a sexy name at all, but he's free. So he costs nothing. If you need a running back this week to play, if a game goes projected like it should with the Ravens really heavy favorites, then Gus Edwards is going to eat in garbage time, and he's going to go from Gus the Bus Edwards to Gus, dump truck Edwards, clean it up in garbage time.
Yeah, I know everyone wants Dobbins to break out, but Gus Edwards, as you said, man, number 1 yards after contact per rush. The guy's playing well. Same thing in Indy, man, with, obviously we want Jonathan Taylor to get the touches, but Jordan Wilkins is number 1 in the league in average missed tackles forced per rush attempt. So, these incumbent backups, don't sleep on them, as sexy as, the new rookie might be coming out. Moving on, we got the Panthers at the Falcons. Atlanta's are 4.5 point favorites. The over-under opened at 51, already up to 54, as we've seen a lot of these overs spiking throughout the early parts of the season. I want to talk about this Panthers passing game because I think both Robbie and DJ Moore are going to be okay. I mean, we're talking about, is DJ Moore even number 1 wide receiver in his own offense? Guess what? Going in this year, DJ Moore was the number 2 option in this passing game, pretty much behind Christian McCaffrey. I mean, this is nothing new to see DJ splitting the upper portion of his team's target share with someone. It just so happens to be Robbie Anderson instead of Christian McCaffrey this year. So right now, DJ Moore is one of just 10 wide receivers with at least 400 air yards. Robbie is 20th. I mean, we're seeing DJ actually get more fantasy-friendly downfield shots than Robbie. Credit to Robbie for having more chemistry with Teddy at this point. He's doing a great job with his intermediate underneath opportunities. But, this Panthers passing game, it looks better and better every week. We expected this. I mean, no team had less continuity entering this season in terms of, coaching staff, O-line, quarterback, than the Carolina Panthers. Teddy's starting to make some good plays. He's looking good out there. And the improving chemistry is going to come with DJ Moore. So I know I've been preaching, buy low on DJ Moore, on this podcast last few weeks. I'm continuing to pound that drum. The guy's averaging a career high 16 yards per reception, more than solid 9 yards per target. He hasn't been perfect, a couple drops here and there. The biggest issue is just 0 touchdowns. What happens with touchdowns? As mad as everyone was about Joe Mixon the first couple weeks of the season, when the volume is in a good place and the touchdowns just aren't there yet, at some point the touchdowns are going to come when the volume persists. So really think they're going to continue to keep DJ Moore involved. Maybe it's not quite as much of a number 1 versus number 2 situation as we hope for, but even with DJ, potentially being number 2 options in certain weeks, he's going to be fine, guys. Andrew, what you got in the ATL Falcons?
Yeah, so the ATL Falcons bleed fantasy points to everything and everyone, especially the tight end position. So I think that if you need a tight end this week, Ian Thomas isn't a bad look. He's been playing a full complement of snaps. He runs a lot of routes. He got more targets last week. So, I mean, we got tight ends on bye weeks. You can't use Robert Tunn. You can't use Hawkinson. So I think that if you need a tight end, I think Ian Thomas is a potential option. Flipping to the Atlanta Falcons offense. So we got Todd Gurley, and he scored 2 touchdowns on Monday Night Football. And I think that this is the prime time to sell. I I think that this is what you want to do with Todd Gurley. I think that you kind of want to move on. He only got 57 rushing yards on 16 carries. Not great. 3.6 yards per attempt. His PFF rushing grade through the first 4 weeks of the season ranks 32 out of 36 qualifying running backs with at least 30 carries. And you look at the schedule looks good, but this is kind of how you leverage that to move off of him. We talked about Kenyon Drake heading into last week against the Carolina Panthers. Oh, he's in a smash spot. Oh, it didn't work because what happened? The Cardinals fell behind and they had to catch up, and Kenyon Drake doesn't profile as the pass catching back. This is the exact same scenario here with Todd Gurley. He hasn't been catching any passes. It's been Brian Hill and Ito Smith working in. And again, he's been able to, sustain fantasy relevance because he's been able to score touchdowns. This is what he's been doing all season and basically a lot of his career. But for me, it's like, yes, this is a juicy matchup, but this is when you move off of him and you just get rid of Todd Gurley because you can do it because it's a good matchup. People are going to see that. They're going to see the green, and he's even got a couple good matchups coming down the line. But the thing is, the matchups won't matter at all if the Falcons defense can't stop anyone, and the Falcons are forced to play from behind, and they're losing games. So that's the thing. I think that this is the perfect time to move off of him, and I think that in DFS, he's going to have that green favorable matchup. I'm going to be totally hands off Gurley.
Well said, sir. Yeah, just absolutely no pass game ceiling. That is not the type of situation we want to be buying. Moving on, we got Bills at Titans. Still some uncertainty surrounding the game. It sounds like, with some of the news this morning about the Titans, being on track now to reopen up their facility. Good news on all the COVID test results. Seems like this game will be happening as scheduled. So that's good news. But I want to talk about this Bills offense. This is, always been, I consider myself, vice president of the Josh Allen fan club, with our, number one guy, Evan Silva over there at ETR. But love everything about Josh Allen, but I want to talk about Devin Singletary for a second because these last 2 weeks, Zach Moss has been out with a toe injury, and Singletary has been playing a near every down role. I mean, legit flirting with that 90% snap rate that we just don't see elsewhere around the league. Overall, 31 carries and 11 targets over these past 2 weeks, and the guy has been fantastic this year, man. Through 4 weeks, Singletary has 22 broken tackles. That is tied for first in the entire league with Josh Jacobs. Dalvin Cook's at 21. Alvin Kamara is at 19. So, and you watch the film, and like this, whenever I'm watching film, I go through every single game, usually, watch as much as I can live. Otherwise, the Game Pass condensed. And, I just write little notes and try to see, when is the film going to line up with the metrics we have? Because PFF, we got PFF Ultimate, can track just about anything. And, one of the guys that's really stuck out to me over these past few weeks was Singletary. Because, when you see a guy seemingly making the first defender miss every play, you go back and look at the broken tackles and the metrics are meeting what we're seeing on film. So love when that happens. He's been playing great. And you know what? Josh Allen's going to continue to vulture a lot of these touchdowns near the 5-yard line. But as long as Singletary kind of keeps being this effective and also getting his pass game usage on pace for 84 targets and 64 receptions, he's going to be a top 20 running back more weeks than not. And, okay, Zach Moss coming back, maybe they're going to go back to 60-40, but with as well as Singletary is playing right now, man, I think he deserves to have that, potentially 70-80% snap roll more weeks than not. Nothing against Moss. I mean, he didn't get to show too much of what he can do before he did get hurt, and I don't think they're going to bench him or anything like that. But, if he comes back slow at all, do not take Devin Singletary off the field because the man is balling out right now. Andrew, what you got on the Titans?
Yeah, the Titans are, hopefully going to play in this game, and hopefully we get a game to look at. But the thing with them is I think that their offense is kind of underrated going into this matchup. I think that the Bills defense is maybe a little overrated. You look at the 2 matchups they had to start the year against the Jets, Dolphins. They looked really great. They look great, obviously, because that's what teams do. But the last 2 weeks against the Rams and Raiders, they've actually allowed the 3rd highest average yards per play in the league, 6.4, which is actually the same as the Dallas Cowboys. So we know the Dallas Cowboys defense is not good, and that's kind of how the Bills have been playing, at least, giving up yardage. So they've been playing in high scoring environments. So I do like the Titans offensive pieces here, especially because the Titans defense isn't really anything to go home about either. Second to last in average yards per play, 6.4. So I like the Titans players. I think the offensive players here. I think Jonnu Smith is in a really good spot. Bills have allowed the 5th most fantasy points to the tight end over the past 2 weeks. And AJ Brown, he's expected to make his return, and I think that he should be in your starting lineup if he's healthy and good to go. We don't know what the status of Adam Humphrey is. He was placed on the actual COVID-19 reserve list, so it all depends on if he'll be available or not. We're not sure about that. But I think that, in his absence, I think that AJ Brown would see more looks. I just think, Corey Davis he's not someone to write home about. They could easily just put Trey White on Corey Davis, move AJ Brown a little bit more. So I think that if AJ Brown's active, I think you got to slide him in.
Be still my beating heart hearing that AJ Brown could be back on track to get that wide receiver one season. We were hyping up all off season. Love when that guy is healthy. Next game up, we got the Las Vegas Raiders at the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs opening up and, maintain 11.5 point favorites, over under at 56. So Josh Jacobs, I mean, look, he hasn't found the end zone the last few weeks, but, similar to Joe Mixon, it's okay, people. Is it annoying that Jacobs, who, by all accounts appears to be more than capable of playing almost every single down, just isn't getting a ton of pass work? No, it sucks. I mean, we're looking at a legit, top 5 fantasy back if he was getting, 5+ targets per game. But unlike last year, it's at least not just Derrick Henry, 1 or 2 targets. We are seeing 3 or 4 targets, and Jacobs has been in that 60-80% snap range every single week. You might think that that's a given. They draft the guy in the first round. He's the engine of their offense. Why wouldn't he be playing that? This was far from a guarantee last year. He played fewer than 60% of the Raiders snaps in 9 of 13 games last season. So yeah, we've seen a little bit more positive game script from the Raiders in general so far in 2020, but over these past 2 weeks, they have been playing behind. They've still gotten Jacobs, who's, 15+ carries. He gets that no matter what, and 3-4 targets. So the fact that, these last few weeks have kind of been his floor outcomes, really looking good moving forward. And I know this matchup is going to scare some people off because, okay, Jalen Richard, Devontae Booker, now they got Theo Riddick out there to take away this pass game work once the Raiders inevitably fall behind to the Chiefs. But, as long as they're sticking to Jacobs, getting these 15+ carries no matter what, as they've been doing, he's got a lot of opportunity here. Chiefs are allowing a league worst 2.3 yards before contact per attempt. Talking this podcast a lot about, I think we're more capable of identifying bad secondaries versus bad run defenses. There's a lot of teams like the Chiefs, Packers, Patriots, where, okay, they quote unquote suck against running backs, but it's more of a, kind of team-wide defensive decision to more closely try to stop opposing passing attacks in the rushing defense. This is 2020 after all. You shouldn't be loading up the box. So just realize that, generally when you see the quote unquote good run defenses, those oftentimes coincide with some of the league's worst overall defenses. So this is still a 56-point over under. Derek Carr generally doing a good job moving the ball this season. I mean, not, amazing. We still kind of wish there was a higher ceiling there, but, Raiders are going to move the ball. I think they're going to find the end zone a few times. No reason why Jacobs won't be the recipient of that. And he's probably going to be, pretty far under-owned on DraftKings relative to some of the guys around him. Andrew, what you got with Mahomes and company?
Mecole Hardman finally, looked like the number 3 receiver in front of Demarcus Robinson. It finally happened. He ran more routes. He played more offensive snaps than Robinson for the first time this season. And, that's what we were worried about, that, okay, he's relegated to, wide receiver 4 duties. And again, it wasn't like by a huge amount, it was barely over, but it's still something that caught my attention, looking at week 4 with his usage. And again, now he's scored 2 touchdowns in the past 2 weeks. He has 4 receptions in the past 2 weeks, or in both games in the last 2 weeks. So his usage is definitely on the uptick. And that's something that I think that's really important to look at, especially the fact that when he is playing, when he's running routes, he actually leads the team in target rate. So he's getting targeted 26% of the time on his routes run, which means, hey, he's going to get looks in this game against the Raiders defense. And this is a defense that Mahomes has absolutely destroyed historically. And this is actually the game where Hardman had his coming out party last season. He had a nice touchdown catch. He went 4 for 61 and a touchdown. And the Raiders really haven't been tested deep that much this year. Again, they played the Saints. They played another team that doesn't throw the ball deep. Obviously, Josh Allen was able to kind of shred them. Or they played the Patriots, who are another team that don't really throw the ball deep. So we saw Josh Allen be able to throw some deep on them. And I think that, Mahomes is going to be able to do that with Mecole Hardman in this matchup. He's only 4.4K on DraftKings, so I like the price. And the last 2 games against the Raiders, Mahomes has averaged 7.5 deep pass attempts. So I don't know if the Raiders just aren't ready for this.
Yeah, and even if it does stay a little bit inconsistent with Mecole, just realize the guy is 1 injury away from being an every week, upside wide receiver 3, if not more, inside of the league's most explosive passing game. Moving on, we got the Philadelphia Eagles at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers calling as 7.5-point favorites, over under holding steady about 45. So, last week's podcast in the Game by Game breakdown had Dwayne McFarland on here, and he made the point that, if you're in a deep league and, you have these bench spots, maybe it's not a dynasty, and Jalen Hurts is available, might be a good time to scoop him up. Not because the Eagles are necessarily going to make the switch from Wentz to Hurts anytime soon, but because Wentz is going to get himself killed if he keeps playing like this right now. I mean, this dude is trying to put the team on his back. I really appreciate it. Seeing him, they're running a wildcat snap and Wentz is out there, going back and forth with a cornerback, like trying to get all physical with him. It's great to see. I'm sure his teammates love it. I think that's, a type of thing that we can't really measure as much as, us at PFF. We try to measure everything. I mean, that's part of like the Josh Allen experience. You can just tell the team loves playing for a quarterback that's, willing to get their head in there and, get a little bit physical, play some real football, but with Wentz, he's going to get himself killed. 2 of his 4 career games with at least 7 rush attempts have come over these past 2 weeks. He's always been a guy that, wants to extend plays, doesn't want to just fall down and take that sack, wants to try to break a few tackles and make something happen because he's able to do it sometimes. And, like your Deshaun Watsons, your Russell Wilsons, it's great when it works out, but also exposes you to a lot of, quote unquote, unnecessary hits. We've already seen, him pressing league high 14 turnover worthy plays this season for Wentz. Nobody else has more than 8. Only Burrow and Watson have taken more sacks. So we got Wentz getting sacked more than ever. He's taken off more than ever. And again, it's not like the most injury prone QB to begin with. It's not like he's the least injury prone QB to begin with. So now he gets a Steelers defense that's pressuring QBs on 50% of their dropbacks this year. No other defense is over even 40%. Look, I mean, I hope Wentz is never hurt again for the rest of his life, but this just looks really scary right now. Again, I mean, Hurts, if he gets out there, we're looking at someone that's going to, have 10 to 15 rush attempts per week, potentially. That is a fantasy football cheat code, everyone. So if you got the roster room, Jalen Hurts, probably the only, I'd say, backup quarterback in the league that we could, confidently expect to truly be in that QB1 high upside QB2 conversation if disaster strikes. Andrew, what you got on the Steelers?
Yeah, Carson Wentz would be number 1 in fantasy if you got fantasy points for grit.
Love it. That's the word I was looking for.
So the Steelers offense, I think, is going to probably play pretty well against the Eagles. I do think that the Eagles defense is interesting on DFS because they actually can pressure the quarterback pretty well too. And Big Ben every once in a while just does this bonehead things that you're kind of like, look up and be like, why did you do that, man? So I think that they're a nice pay down option because they do pressure the quarterback a lot. But the best matchup, it's weird because the Eagles have always been a team that, we got to target the perimeter receivers. This is this big game, but it's been the whole role reversal with that because of the entrance of Darius Slay and Nick Roby-Coleman, who's really been, a punching bag for slot receivers so far this year. So Juju Smith-Schuster really has the best matchup in the slot against Roby-Coleman. He's allowed the 3rd highest passer rating from cornerbacks covering from the slot this year. So I think he's in a really good spot. And that obviously means we're going to probably see more of Darius Slay on Deontay Johnson, but you just can't, I'm not going to bench Deontay Johnson just because he's so involved in the offense. Again, it's a tough matchup, but this is when players like Deontay Johnson, who is just a really good football player, like this is when they come and play their best. So again, maybe temper expectations from him, maybe not a DFS play, but someone that it's like, no, you got to still start him because he's just so heavily involved in the offense.
If you got Deontay and like your next ranked wide receiver and you're trying to figure out who to sit, okay, that's when we can, consider the cornerback matchup. But yes, in general, don't let one perceived tough matchup really, change your entire whereabouts in a week. I would note that, Darius Slay did leave pretty late in that game with a leg injury. We'll see if he pops up on the Wednesday injury report, but something to monitor because without Slay, that would certainly obviously be a big boost for Deontay. Quick shout out to our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. If you like fantasy football, you need to be playing on Underdog Fantasy, my personal favorite new fantasy football app. The website and app are super slick and by far the best experience out there. Do snake draft games for real money every week. Team that built the app is top notch. Customer support is the best in the biz. Constantly updating and adding new features. Look up Underdog Fantasy on your app store or go to underdogfantasy.com to play today. Make your first deposit today and be sure to use my code PFF after you do. Let them know I sent you. Next game up, we got the Los Angeles Rams at the Washington football team. Quick side note, I just like saying football team now. I mean, I'm done saying Washington and people, tell me to say Washington. No, I'm all in on the shtick. It's the football team, but Rams are 8.5 point favorites. Over under is 46.5. So we have seen a different Jared Goff this year. The guy's playing some good football, but they are truly like, just handcuffing him as much as possible, trying to win these games, with McVay's scheme and with, the run game. So right now, Goff is only averaging 30.5 pass attempts per game. Last year, he was at 39. In 2018, he was at 35. I mean, look, some guys like Kirk Cousins at least have fantasy friendly, like pass attempts. Like Cousins, when he's going back there, he's throwing the ball at least 20 yards downfield and about 25% of his pass attempts. That's the highest mark in the league. Goff is at 5.7% right now. Drew Brees is at 5.4%. We've been making fun of Brees all season for not throwing downfield. And honestly, Jared Goff is right there with him. So obviously Goff has the arm strength. And, like we've seen with Brees over the years, it's not like Brees hasn't been throwing downfield, that much more than past years. I mean, he's never been a guy that consistently went downfield. The issue comes when defenses don't even respect the the downfield threat. So it'll be interesting to see if this, changes as the year goes on. If, teams start to recognize that Van Jefferson, Josh Reynolds don't really deserve the same amount of attention as Brandon Cooks, and they start playing this Rams offense differently. For right now, I mean, it's just tough to get behind the upside in this passing game. Goff, QB 10 in fantasy points for dropback. Again, when he's throwing, he's doing a good job, particularly downfield. It's just not very often. He's the QB 18 overall in fantasy. And I think because of that, we got to start treating both Kupp and Robert Woods more as, low end wide receiver twos than, flirting with that wide receiver one borderline. As we saw last week, I mean, Kupp, broken coverage, was able to just run away from the safeties. Woods still getting his rush attempts. Both these guys are really talented. They'll make the most of their opportunities. The problem is their opportunities per game are looking more in the 6 to 8 range than, the 8 to 12 range that we were seeing in past years. So not a ton of volume, fantasy friendly volume in the passing game, but at least it is pretty condensed around those two guys. Andrew, what do you have on the, wait for it, football team?
A football team, just we're all football fans.
That's
why it works. It just rolls off the tongue. And one last thing on the Rams receivers, I was actually looking at end zone targets, and both Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods have 0 end zone targets on the year. So that kind of just goes to show, in terms of, you look at their opportunities, like, these are not high ceiling players. So, and this is something I look at when I'm doing trades. When you make a trade, the last thing you want to do is trade away a player that could be a potential league winner. You're just like, oh my God, like, why did I just do that? But Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, where they are, floor players, I guess I would say, more, they're not league winning players. So you can package them to get up to a really dominant wide receiver. I think those are good moves, and it's not like they're bad players. So, you're not going to get an automatic reject because you're just trying to ship off bad players. They both have value, but I think that it's perceived maybe a little bit higher than actuality.
Agreed.
But with the Washington football team, I want to talk about Antonio Gibson, who finally kind of gets a decent matchup. He's been kind of relegated to these tough matchups the last couple of weeks, with the Browns run defense, and then he had the Ravens run defense last week. But we've seen him now, he's really kind of identified himself as the clear go-to running back on the Washington offense. And now he's playing the Rams, who have allowed at least a double-digit fantasy point outings to each of the running backs that they've faced this season. So I think that, he's seen 59% of the team's carries last week. And most importantly, he saw 3 carries inside the 5-yard line. He's getting the goal line work. It's not going to Peyton Barber. So I don't know what they were doing in week 1 when they gave Peyton Barber like 7 red zone touches. Like, that's not happening anymore. It's all about Antonio Gibson. And we now also see, okay, JD McKissic, yes, he's still involved in the passing game. But when the Washington football team is down, they are, checking the ball down to Gibson and McKissic. So he has multiple ways. He's super involved in the game, regardless of game script. Again, we'd almost rather have him catch passes if the Washington football team's losing. But if they get up in a game, he's going to be part of that offense. So, and he obviously has big playability too. So I think he's locked and loaded in your lineups.
Yeah, you're talking about league winners. Gibson really could be that league winner. Going in this year, I thought his best case scenario was, as a scat kind of pony back with Barber or Bryce Love taking the early down work. Gibson has the early down work. Now we're just waiting for him to completely overtake McKissic as the pass down back, which should be happening soon enough if he keeps playing well. So love everything you said there. Moving on, Arizona Cardinals at the New York Jets. Cardinals opened as 8.5 point favorites. That is down to 6.5. Over unders up from 46 to 47.5. Maybe we see, the Cardinals get a few more points with Sam Darnold unlikely to play. But I want to talk about Kyla Murray, because kind of lost in the Kenyon Drake disappointment has been the reality that Murray's passing efficiency hasn't, taken the jump we were hoping for. He's actually regressed in terms of yards per attempt, 6.7 in 2019, just 6.1 in 2020. It's interesting though, because you dig a little bit closer and Murray is averaging, he has a higher PFF passing grade, a higher average target depth than last year, and his adjusted completion rate is higher. So he's actually throwing downfield more often and more accurate at doing so. The problem is just, I think, been this underwhelming wide receiver core, other than DeAndre Hopkins. And look, they've all been banged up. Christian Kirk, has been questionable all these weeks. Larry Fitzgerald is about 60 years old at this point. But, Andy Isabella isn't getting the kind of opportunities that he should probably deserve based on how efficient he's been on a per target basis. But either way, the Cardinals right now, only 4.4 yards after the catch per reception. That's 22nd in the league. Last year, almost over a 4-yard more at 5.5, tied for 13th. So I just think, other than Kyler and Hopkins, and Kyler running, of course, nothing has really been working in this offense yet. The fun term to call them is the horizontal raid recently, because they just aren't really airing it out. And this is the issue. And this was kind of the reasoning behind maybe looking at the 2020 Cardinals looking like the 2019 Browns from that perspective. But now Kyler, No problems in fantasy land because this guy is running to his heart's desire. And oh my goodness, he is good doing so. 16 game rushing pace right now is 1,060 rushing yards and 16 touchdowns on the ground. I mean, I don't know who said it in my mentions, but someone mentioned that Kyler runs like an angry toddler when he's in the open field. Now I can't stop thinking about that. But whatever he runs like, the guy is, faster than almost anyone else on the field. And despite these hiccups in the passing game, it's such a fantasy football cheat code that we can continue to rank Kyler as, a high-end fantasy QB1 despite the issues through the air. Andrew, what do you got on the Jets, if anything? Because goodness gracious, screw this offense.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Jets could potentially get their best player on offense back this week. Le'Veon Bell is supposed to make his return to the lineup here in week 5. And I know you mentioned off the top that Sam Darnold's probably not going to play in this game. I mean, I can't imagine. I know he wants to play, and even though they cut Kalen Ballage, who helped the Jets basically, their best highlight play of the year was because of Kalen Ballage. He missed that block, and then Sam Darnold turned into a 50+ rushing touchdown. But the thing with Joe Flacco is if Joe Flacco's in the game, I think that's actually pretty good for a guy like Le'Veon Bell. And even if Sam Darnold plays, if he has a bum shoulder, I can't imagine they're going to chuck the ball down the field. They're probably going to do a lot of checkdowns with Le'Veon Bell. And we saw them throw the ball more to the running back. Kalen Ballage was actually the guy he saw 10 targets over the past 3 weeks without Bell in the offense. Kalen Ballage has obviously now been released from the team because Bell's coming back. But Joe Flacco, in his last year in Denver, he had a 26% target share to the running back position. So he was peppering guys like Royce Freeman and Phillip Lindsay. They both averaged under 4 targets per game. And so if that's condensed into one player, I think that Bell could actually be really involved in the passing game, which again, that's what you want in fantasy. You need those points. And so who cares if Le'Veon Bell, Frank Gore out touches Le'Veon Bell on the ground as carries, whatever, it doesn't matter. If the Cardinals get up in this game and Bell's in there, catching passes, I think that's good enough. And you just look at this receiving core. I mean, how can you not just flex Le'Veon Bell out in the slot? I mean, in his prime in Pittsburgh, we talked about it was Antonio Brown was the receiver 1 and Le'Veon Bell was that wide receiver 2, essentially. So I think that you can start Le'Veon Bell this week in PPR and you'll get at least a solid floor.
Honestly, when you said that their best player was coming back, my mind jumped to Denzel Mims for some reason. It's a good call with Bell. I'm not trying to say Mims is better. I don't know why my mind went there, but yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, Bell last year, he didn't get the same targets, but when he did work outside in the slot, not wide, he still looked great. I mean, linebackers and safeties just can't handle that dude as a route runner. Would love to see Gase and company do that, but obviously tough to, assume rational coaching out there with the Jets. Moving on, we got the Jaguars at the Texans. Houston sitting at 6.5 point favorites, with Bill O'Brien out of the picture. Vegas just loves him now. Why not? Over under is up from 52.5 to 54.5. So just want to look at, okay, what else do we need to see from James Robinson to treat the Steelers an every week RB1? If you aren't already, we need to do it. I mean, right now, one of just 10 players with at least 70 touches this season, and he's doing good with them. I mean, 12th among 45 qualified dudes and yards after contact per attempt. He's caught 14 of 15 targets this year. Okay, he's not the fastest guy. He's not the most agile guy, but the guy picks up yards. He doesn't make mistakes. Clearly, the Jaguars like what they have here, and this matchup is just borderline erotic, honestly. I mean, only the Packers and Chiefs have allowed more yards before contact per rush than the Texans this season. We saw in the Dolphins game where Robinson, even with the Jaguars falling behind, managed to have 6 catches in a blowout L. So it's a great floor. If I've had some people, have or send trades to me in the mentions where it's like James Robinson for, a legit, top 10 talent. In that case, go ahead, because again, Robinson, if someone wants to treat him as a top 10 talent he's been, I think you can trade him because, okay, he's at his ceiling right now. It cannot get better for James Robinson than it's been for these first 4 weeks. Now, having this guy in your team doesn't hurt, obviously, but, just a little bit concerned about anyone on this Jaguars offense. We know this team is probably going to finish with 5 or fewer wins. Doesn't mean we still can't have, a rare exception to the rule of, fantasy friendly players usually coming from the better offenses. But, just realize that, hey, if someone wants to treat him as a top 5-6 back, he's been so far, don't be afraid to go out there and maybe get a little bit more consistent studs we can feel better about as, we get into the November, December months of the season. Andrew, what do you got in the Bobless Texans?
Yeah, so we got Romeo Crennel stepping in as the interim head coach, and he's a defensive-minded head coach. So, if he has any influence on the offensive game plan at all, I would assume that he's going to probably do what defensive coaches do and where they're going to run the ball. And that makes sense to do against Jacksonville. They've allowed the second most rushing yards to running backs this season over the last 2 weeks. So, I mean, I would say that they're going to get a hefty amount of David Johnson, but at the same time, Bill O'Brien's the guy that, stuck out, made the trade to get David Johnson. So, we saw Duke Johnson come back last week and kind of cut into David Johnson's usage a little bit more than maybe we all kind of gave him credit for. And we all kind of assumed, hey, David Johnson's going to be the guy again. But Duke Johnson actually, cut in, legitimately, especially into the receiving game. But I think you can still got to roll with David Johnson. The matchup is still too good. He's still the lead back. And if they do decide to run more, after basically throwing at the third highest rate this season, just because they've been behind in essentially all their games, I think they're going to see more of the run game. I think you're going to see a more efficient Deshaun Watson, just because he's not going to be the defense isn't going to be able to tee up on him, because it seems like he's always under pressure because they have to throw so much. So I think that that's going to help him. CJ Henderson for the Jags is questionable. He left last week's game with a shoulder injury, so that would slide in 7th round rookie Chris Claybrooks in as one of the starting defensive backs. So you're going to start Will Fuller. He's got, a 26% target share in the games that he's been healthy this year. Never start Brandon Cooks. I think that's it.
How come you're out on Brandon Cooks? He was still out there every snap.
Well, the thing is, and this is something that I heard someone else talk about, it seems like Brandon Cooks is almost kind of like filling in the role as like a backup to Will Fuller, where he's not actually running, opposite of Will Fuller, not necessarily, but, the one game he was his best was when Will Fuller was basically like, out of the game plan.
That's true.
So I think that you're seeing Stills working, you're seeing Cobb has a role in the slot. So just Cooks, man. I just can't get back into it.
It's definitely not a 1A, 1B situation like we thought it might be going forward. I understand if you need to pick someone up. I wouldn't give up completely on Brandon Cooks yet. I don't think he's going to go catchless again anytime soon. But yes, I do agree. It's definitely the Will Fuller show in Houston, and you love to see it. Please stay healthy, Will. I'm knocking on wood right now, and I hope everyone else is at home. Miami Dolphins at the San Francisco 49ers. 49ers 8-point favorites. Over-unders at 47. So Fitzpatrick is going to start. This is what Coach Brian Flores said about Tua. He's saying that, okay, he's checked all the medical boxes, but and here's where the quote starts. If it was my kid and he had a serious injury like that, I wouldn't want his coach to be in a rush to put him in there because of media pressure. No one is going to pressure me into doing anything. I mean, bro, it's like you're saying he's healthy, but then you're saying you don't want to rush him back from the injury. So, like, which one is it? Is the guy 100% ready to go or not? Because at this point, man, I think we got to go back to the Tua show, because Fitzpatrick, he's not even giving him that kind of wide range of outcomes that we saw last season. I mean, he only has one more attempt thrown 20+ yards downfield than Drew Brees this season. So, I'm just really sticking up for Brees in this episode of the podcast, talking about all these other gunslinger frauds. But really, Fitzpatrick has not been that same, DGAF gunslinger that was the fantasy friendly, really the second QB2 behind only Lamar Jackson last year after he retook that job from Josh Rosen. So, Devontae Parker gets his, not expecting any shadow coverage in this matchup, even if Sherman finds a way to get back. But otherwise, it's just tough to expect much from anyone in this offense. The backfield, okay, Gaskin, I guess he's got a nice little target floor, but, with Jordan Howard and, his dark visor coming in the vulture every time they get inside the 5, that hurts. The wide receiver room, Preston Williams is pretty much losing his target share to Isaiah Ford. And so is Mike Gesicki. I mean, Mike Gesicki is now like their number 2 slot receiver almost, and like their number 3 tight end. So it's unfortunate. I hope the usage changes and, they kind of get Ford out of there, because it's not like he's doing all that much with his targets in the first place. So right now, pretty much a mess in Miami. Should have kind of, again, this is, talk about the Jaguars. Like when we have these teams with these super low win totals, we just got to realize that there is a pretty low floor, involved, unless we're talking about the true alpha options like Devontae Parker. Andrew, what you got on the 49ers?
So I think if you own Deebo Samuel and you drafted him, you probably didn't start him this week. I think that you got the perfect amount of action that you wanted. He didn't go off, so it's not like you benched a guy who, had an astounding game, but he did enough in the game. He was involved enough in the game plan. He had 3 targets for 35 yards. He had 1 rushing attempt for 10 yards. He did enough to show, okay, hey, he's like getting back. Like, I think now we can kind of look at him more. Okay, it looks like he's back from the injury. He's going to be more involved. Kyle Shanahan, unlike all these other coaches, just told us straight up, hey, he's going to be limited in his role. And that's exactly what he was. So thank you, Kyle Shanahan, for just, telling us what's up, man. Like, I wish that, Bruce Arians could do the same thing, but, that's not how things work. But you have this matchup against the Miami Dolphins. They haven't been very good on defense, despite the fact that, people were hyping them up entering the year. I mean, they've had problems with the corners staying healthy. Damien Harris hasn't played particularly well. So, they've allowed the 7th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position this season. And again, I'm not so afraid of these, even if Byron Jones comes back. The 49ers move their guys around to get them rushing touches. Like, it doesn't matter which defensive back is covering you if you have a rushing attempt. If Deebo Samuel's coming at you, it doesn't matter how good you are at covering because he's going to run you over. So I think that Kyle Shanahan is going to find ways to get the ball into Deebo Samuel's hand, into Brandon Ayuk's hand, because the Dolphins have actually allowed the 3rd highest yards after catch per reception this season. So they are not good at wrapping guys up after the catch. They ranked 4th worst in total yards after the catch allowed this year. And over the past 2 weeks, they rank last in missed tackles on defense. So I think that you're going to see a lot of broken tackles and a lot of yak for Mr. Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, only thing I would add there is, Jerick McKinnon, he needs to be in any starting lineup if you have him. 91% snap rate, led the entire league at the running back position last week. Even if Raheem Mostert comes back, I mean, now we have a, 2-back backfield with McKinnon and Mostert. That's fine. It was, earlier in the year when we were like, okay, Coleman's also there and maybe Jeff Wilson gets involved. We can live with 2-back committee people. It's when it gets 3 to 4 and bad offenses that we have problems. That is not the case in San Francisco right now. 4:00 games now. Giants at the Cowboys. Dallas opened as 11-point favorites. That is down to 9. Over/under staying firm at 54. So Daniel Jones in this Giants offense. Daniel Jones was someone that I was fairly high on. I mean, just, kind of like QB 14-ish throughout the offseason. Then I remember I had Evan Silva on to talk about quarterbacks in July and, talking about Daniel Jones and how only Lamar Jackson had more 30-point fantasy games in 2019. And Evan just brought up the good point that it was like, well, Jason Garrett's calling plays now. We got the clapper there. How is that going to impact Daniel Jones in year 2? Joe Judge, just being the ultimate kind of old school football guy there. And the answer is, yeah, it has really hurt him. And okay, the matchups have been brutal, but the guy hasn't thrown a touchdown since week 1. Giants offense has yet to surpass 16 points. It's not like they're lacking skill position talent. I mean, I know losing Saquon sucks, but I mean, you still have Evan Ingram, Darius Slayton, Golden Tate. There's still some talent out there. There's enough talent out there to score more than 16 points. I mean, at some point, the matchup only means so much. And, this is the final time I'm going to, stick up for Drew Brees here, but Daniel Jones has a lower deep ball rate than Drew Brees this season. So truly, we are looking at, Daniel Jones, the guy's got a big arm. I mean, again, he impressed me last year with, a guy that was kind of written off as a bust immediately, turned some heads. It was okay in a lot of really good matchups, and that's what he has this week, but just haven't seen anything this year. And he is 4th in dropbacks. So hey, this is the week, Daniel Jones. This is the week, Jason Garrett. Go get your revenge against this Cowboys team, quote unquote revenge game for Jason. And there's so much mediocrity on the other side of the ball. You got to think they can move the ball to some extent. But man, the only things that have looked good in this Giants offense over the past 2 weeks, as someone that has unfortunately, forced themselves to watch every one of their snaps, is Daniel Jones when he decides to take off and run. He's sneaky athletic. And when freaking Devontae Freeman is just inexplicably not guarded and he kind of gets these dump offs and can fall forward for 10 yards. So the running game, Wayne Gallman had one good run. That's all I can say about them. And the receivers right now, aren't doing much either. So, I was one that missed pretty hard on, stacking Jones in this offense in that 49ers game when the whole defense was banged up. I know the Cowboys defense is just the worst in the league and we shouldn't expect them to fix things, but I think the Giants offense might even be worse than the Cowboys defense is. For that reason, I'm probably going to be fading the Giants, even though this is a trendy bounce back spot. Andrew, what you got on the Cowboys?
Yeah, I think too, it was underrated the move of Pat Shurmur to leave and go to Denver, because Pat Shurmur, you look at Denver, their deep ball attempts were way up when Drew Lock was playing, when Jeff Driscoll was playing. So I think that has a lot to do with it too, that, the different play caller, different offensive coordinator, was a better fit with Daniel Jones, who has a good arm, down the field. And especially it's definitely hurt guys like Darius Slayton, who, maybe can, bounce back in the spot against the Cowboys secondary. That's pretty bad, to being quite frank. But when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys, it's cliche to say when you talk about, too many mouths to feed, but I mean, the amount of volume that this passing offense has and the fact that Michael Gallup has just continued to disappoint week after week. He's had one good week in the first 4 games, but I mean, this is what you want. This is the most passing volume you could ask for of any wide receiver, and Gallup's really not doing much. He has 11% target share, and that's still averaging 5 targets per game, which isn't really even that bad for, a deep threat, but it's just not there for him. And you could project in this game, maybe the Cowboys don't throw as much because this is a game that they should probably win. They should be able to run the football effectively in this game. And, there's a chance that Gallup sees a lot of James Bradbury out on the outside. Amari Cooper isn't really a guy that guys can really shadow because Amari Cooper moves into the slot and and he's just been so consistent this year so far. But Bradbury's been really, really good. PFF's second highest graded cornerback entering week 5. And the Giants actually haven't really been targeted downfield. They've just seen 4 passing plays of over 20 or more yards this season to outside wide receivers. We know Gallup's on the outside. And yeah, I just think that this isn't a good spot for Michael Gallup. And I think that he should be on the bench.
Yeah, I think the whole allure of, Gallup going in this year was the fact that him and Cooper were more or less just 1A, 1B, depending on the week last season. And Gallup actually, I believe, ended up with more targets. Or it was, within 6. It was super close last year. But right now, through 4 weeks, Amari Cooper, 51 targets, Zeke at 30, CeeDee Lamb 29, Schultz at 28, and Gallup in 5th place on his own team at 24. So, you said it, man. We couldn't ask for more volume. I do think we're going to see Gallup rise up a little bit, but certainly not the, sort of role and sort of start that we were hoping for, drafting him as more of a true, wide receiver 2 back in August. Moving on, we got the Broncos at the Patriots. Not seeing a line right now. We got some uncertainty under center of both teams. Hopefully Drew Lock's back. Hopefully Cam Newton's back. We just don't know right now. But okay, I mean, even if Drew Lock's back, I think right now on this, Broncos offense, it comes down to 3 guys: Melvin Gordon, Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick. Looking like that. Noah Fant's going to miss some time. Cortland Sutton's already out. KJ Hamler's got a hamstring injury. So I think Judy's going to win out. He's 12th in air yards right now. I mean, I know the touchdown last week was a little bit fluky. Probably should have just been picked off. Wasn't the Moss that a lot of people were tweeting about. But, his route running ability isn't overrated at all. I mean, this dude, again, continues to kind of live up to that reputation that a lot of people, including, PFF's own Mike Renner, were, saying before the draft, were truly one of the best route runners we've seen come out in quite some time. This matchup, man, in New England, I mean, we saw, them give Kansas City all sorts of problems, even removing, with all those players they lost to COVID that just chose to opt out in their front 7. Their secondary remains so good that, it's just a pretty much impossible spot for whoever's going to be under center in Denver going into here. Again, I think more weeks than not moving forward, Jeudy will be good. Melvin Gordon, as long as Philip Lindsay remains out, is getting this 80% bell cow role that you need to be starting him with that sort of touch distribution well over Royce Freeman. And Tim Patrick, okay, he's made some good plays over the last 2 weeks. He's going to be out there on the field. There's not too many number 1 or number 2 wide receivers out there on the waiver wire, and that's what Tim Patrick is. So I get it, but particularly in this matchup, just stay away if you can. I would say Melvin Gordon should be the only kind of Broncos player that winds up in over 50% of starting lineups this week. Andrew, what do you got on the Patriots? Hopefully with Cam Newton.
Yeah, I'm holding out hope that we don't have to see a Brett Rippon versus Jarrett Stidham matchup on Sunday, but we'll see. And I think when I actually looked at one of the lines, I saw that Patriots -11, which I thought was interesting. But so the popular name and kind of player that's going to be generating the most buzz in the fantasy world for the Patriots is going to be Damian Harris. After he had a huge game on Monday night, rushed for exactly 100 rushing yards. So he hit that DraftKings bonus. So that was great. But the thing with Damian Harris is, the other running backs are still really involved. And it was a really good matchup against the Chiefs. Chris Jones didn't play. And like you mentioned before earlier, the Chiefs don't have a good run defense. They let teams run on them. And that's how they, operate on defense. They have a much stronger secondary. So the thing is, you need to realize that Damien Harris took over the Sony Michel role. Like that's exactly what he did in this offense. He didn't do anything in the passing game. He got all the carries. And Rex Burkhead, mixed in some carries. He had 11 carries. James White had a couple carries here, but both of them were more involved in the passing game, of course. So that's what I expect to see more of. If the Patriots are in positive game script again, yeah, it'll be, a decent day for Damian Harris. But again, his ceiling is going to be limited in terms of he's not going to be used in the passing game. And Rex Burkhead was actually used more in the red zone. Damian Harris only saw 1 red zone snap, compared to James White and Burkhead. So that's something I'm just concerned about. So again, if you're looking at like DFS, he's 4,300. I'm still not going to probably go to that because he has to either score multiple touchdowns or, somehow rush for 100 yards for you to really pay off on that. For me, at least, I just don't see the upside. But if you're playing in a regular seasonal league, you pick him up off the waiver wire. I think that he's a fine play. Denver, has allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points to running backs this season, but they don't have Jarrell Casey. They didn't have Jarrell Casey when they faced the Jets, but the Jets are kind of like a hard team. You have to kind of, make adjustments when you look at fantasy points when you have the Jets as the team. So their defense isn't as good. But I think that, Damian Harris can at least be an RB3 flex play.
Good stuff there. Moving on, we got the Indianapolis Colts at the Cleveland Browns. Colts coming in as 2.5-point favorites. Over-under is holding at 47. So Jonathan Taylor, we don't like the snap counts, but hey, this is a guy that's going to be flirting with 15 to 25 touches on a weekly basis. Just because Wilkins and Hines are so involved doesn't mean we need to be giving up on Taylor. Maybe, the connotation as this, top 5, top 6 fantasy RB was a little bit too soon, but this is still a situation where I think we need to be running him up as an RB1, RB2. He's playing behind a great O-line. I would note that they ranked 23rd in yards before contact per rush. So maybe they're still just figuring it out, man. We've seen this with rookie running backs over the years, Zeke, Miles Sanders last year, even Dave Montgomery, to a lesser extent. Like, it's not uncommon for them to struggle a little bit out of the gate. Pick it up, start letting the game slow down, all these, vision things, all these, tape grinder typecast. I know we can't measure. So I don't want to get too wordy about it, but it would make sense if Taylor, improves as the year goes on. Again, the role, he's the lead back there. He's going to get fed 15, 25 touches per game. That's all we can ask for. This is unfortunate. He's not flirting with 30. Yes. But the Colts are rightfully going out there, trying to have all their guys ready for January. They're not going to just give Taylor 30 plus touches in games that they're winning by, multiple scores. And that's been the case over the past 3 weeks. I mean, they've never been in a situation where they're in the fourth quarter, only in, a 7-point game where it does make sense to give Taylor more of those touches. So, stay patient, keep firing up, keep starting them. We're going to see bigger days ahead. And, be careful about, yelling about the snap counts and going, oh, Jordan Wilkins, get this guy the hell out of here. Give us Jonathan Taylor. He's playing really good. I mean, just like Gus Edwards is, first in the league in yards after contact per carry, Wilkins is averaging a league high 4.41 missed forced tackles per rush attempt. So, we also had Justin Jackson in there as, one of these incumbent backups that is a lot better than people give him credit for. I know we all want to get behind these rookies. We spend February through the end of April every year getting hyped about these guys, but don't count out the backs that have been in the system and, actually shown some upside before. Andrew, tell me about the Browns.
Yeah, Justin Jackson, PFF's second highest graded rusher in 2019.
Ooh.
Put a stamp on Justin Jackson's name. But the Cleveland Browns, so a lot of talk in this game will probably be about, the Colts defense and how it's actually played really, really well this year. It's really underrated. They rank 8th in PFF run defense grade, but the thing that I don't think enough people are talking about is the Cleveland Browns offensive line is just mauling people. And basically they're playing how we've seen the Colts offensive line play in years past, where they're just destroying defensive lines. And we saw it last week against the Dallas Cowboys. Again, it's not a great defense, but they actually put the pain on. And that's what we're going to see probably more of. I think that even though the Colts defense looks like a tough matchup for running backs, it's still not going to make a difference because the Browns have the better of the two units on the offensive line. They have the PFF's highest graded run blocking unit through 4 weeks, and that gives them an edge. And, when we look at PFF's O-line versus D-line matchup chart. So, you're going to look at Kareem Hunt on DFS, and if he's, good to go in terms of health, like you have to play him, in cash games or whatever you're doing, because he is going to have the advantage there. So even though it's, there's a little red 3, and you look at the ranking and it's like, oh, maybe that's not a great matchup. Again, sometimes people don't play the obvious picks, but it's Kareem Hunt. And I'm just here to tell you, just like, don't worry about the matchup. It doesn't matter here. Kareem Hunt's one of the best running backs that we've seen in the league. And now he's going to, potentially get a full workload. Again, I think Dearness Johnson, depending on, where Hunt is with this groin injury. I mean, we haven't heard anything about it since, last week, and he was able to play. But if he's good, I mean, hopefully they just rest him this whole week and just be like, yeah, we're just going to unleash you on Sunday. Would love to see that. But, and the thing is with the Colts defense as well, they haven't really faced that much legitimate, running back threats. Really, they played Dalvin Cook and he had a solid game, but besides that, they haven't really played much. So I think Kareem Hunt's locked in. I think Dearness Johnson is worth a pickup, on the waiver wire this week, just in case, Chubb is out for a while and you just want to err on that side of caution just because Hunt had an injury last week.
Yeah, I would just prioritize, Justin Jackson and Damian Harris over Dearness Johnson for sure. Look, if Hunt's out there, he is getting, I think, the lion's share of the snaps and touches, period. Let's pretend that this is more of a 1A, 1B backfield, and I'm giving it credit for, though. Hunt's getting the receiving work anyway. And honestly, yes, Dearness Johnson was working, as the number 2 back behind Hunt, but Dontrell Hilliard was right there within only a few snaps of Dearness Johnson. So even, let's say Hunt goes down, man, like, okay, Dearness Dearness Johnson, we're probably talking about like a borderline RB2 because he's not getting a feature role. Dontrell Hilliard's going to be involved, and they would probably add another guy. So, excuse me. Look, again, like Cordero Patterson last week. I mean, I love Dearness Johnson. This guy was great in the AAF. I watched every single one of those AAF games, and, Dearness was great. I remember his swaggy touchdowns with the Orlando Apollos and everything. But I also remember making fun of this dude on a weekly basis because he couldn't even run a 40-yard dash in under 4.8 seconds at the combine. You want to blow all your fab on a running back that can't run a 4.7 or better? Come on, people. We're better than that. So, excuse me. But yeah, quick shout out to our sponsors over there at Monkey Knife Fight. I'm about to get in a monkey knife fight that anyone wants to get Dearness Johnson. But, so look, go to Monkey Knife Fight, put $20 in that account. And guess what? You can turn that $20 into even more money playing daily fantasy and prop games at one of the fastest growing fantasy sports sites in the USA and Monkey Knife Fight. But that's not all. You deposit that $20, you use code PFF, you will get a free PFF Edge annual subscription. That's a $40 value for $20. And like I said, you have a chance to turn that $20 into much more. So go to Monkey Knife Fight. Do not blow your fab on Dearness Johnson and thank me later. Moving on, we got the Minnesota Vikings at the Seattle Seahawks. Seahawks opened at -9, down to 7-point favorites. Over-unders holding steady at a sky-high 57.5. And, talked about this earlier with, Jared Goff, kind of the meaning of like fantasy-friendly pass attempts. And that is what we have here with Kirk Cousins, because somehow 4 weeks, the Vikings have either been scoring 30 points or they had a 17-point loss to the Colts. Games that you would think that they would really have to throw the ball a lot. Cousins has thrown 25, 26, 27, and most recently only 22 passes. The good news, league high 25% deep ball rate. I mean, look, like Matthew Stafford was the guy that kind of came out of nowhere last year, chucking the ball down the field. That is Kirk Cousins this year. And so Adam Thielen's number one still. 2 weeks ago, we were wondering, okay, could Jefferson take over? Whatever. It doesn't matter who's number one. It's Thielen, but Jefferson is clearly number two. So we have a condensed 2-option offense, more or less like we're looking at, the 2012 to like the 2019 Seattle Seahawks, where we don't have a ton of passing game volume, but the volume we do get, fantasy friendly red zone looks and downfield deep balls. So we know Thielen's great, no question about that. But Justin Jefferson, man, he's not going to have 100 yards every week, probably not, but he truly looks great. I mean, only 4 people in the league are averaging over 3 yards per route run right now. Devontae Adams is at 3. George Kittle's at 3.03, Alvin Kamara's at 3.45, and Justin freaking Jefferson is in first place at 3.7. For those not familiar with the metric, usually Julio Jones is the only one finishing seasons with over 3 yards per route run. Anything over 2 is usually a sign that we're talking about a damn good receiver. So really like what we're seeing from Justin Jefferson. And this is the right matchup where, same thing with the Cowboys. When you're playing the Seahawks, they're going to put up points on you, and they don't have the secondary to stop you from putting up points. So could even see, Kirk Cousins, dare I say, get up to like 30 passes in this game. And if he does, majority going to be going to Thielen, majority going to be going to Justin Jefferson. Seahawks have allowed a league high 1,634 passing yards through 4 weeks. Over 400 passing yards per game against the Seattle defense. Browns are in second, all the way down at 13-26. I really like the chances for this Vikings passing game to continue to pop off and potentially make this game close. Andrew, what you got in Russ and company?
So for the rest of the season, would you take Justin Jefferson or Marquise Brown?
Oh, that's a good one. I would still go Marquise Brown, but it's a conversation. I think they're both top 24 guys.
All right, I like it. All right, the Seattle Seahawks are probably going to put the heat on Kirk Cousins in prime time. So again, you're going to be starting the usual suspects. There's not, some hard-hitting analysis I can tell you. I can't tell you which one of Metcalf or Lockett's going to go off. It's really hard to. I tried looking at the slot targets. It doesn't matter. Like, they're both just stud guys. They're both top 12 guys going into this week. So you're going to start all your classic Seahawks. But the one player that's kind of going under the radar is Greg Olsen. So he's now, been more involved the past 2 weeks. He's at least 5 receptions, at least 6 targets the last 2 weeks. And again, tight end, you're just trying to look for a guy to fall into the end zone. And, who throws a lot of touchdowns is Russell Wilson. So it's not a bad option to have Russell Wilson as your quarterback. Again, Greg Olsen, he's old, he's dusty. We don't like guys like that, but he plays in arguably one of the best offenses in the league. And the Vikings haven't really been good at, defending the tight end position this year. They actually rank 31st in yards per attempt towards tight end targets. And then they've actually allowed an average of 67 receiving yards to the position so far. So if you are scrambling, Greg Olsen's not generating a lot of buzz, some of these other tight ends that are off the waiver wire. If you just need someone to plug and play, you could do way worse than just adding Greg Olsen this week.
Man, if either Russ or Deshaun Watson could just get like one really talented number one tight end to play all that snaps, that dude's catching 10 touchdowns a year. And I'm looking at you, David Njoku. Go get out there.
You mean Chris Herndon? Dude, come on.
Oh my God.
Dude, get him out of New York.
And then he lets one pass hit him in the chest. It was a bad drop. And now everyone's like, oh, you stand for this guy all off season. So sorry to everyone that wasted the 15th round pick on Chris Herndon. You can blame me when the league doesn't work out the way you wanted it. Last one here. Thank you everyone for sticking around, listening to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Monday Night Football, Los Angeles Chargers at the New Orleans Saints. Saints are sitting at 7.5 point favorites, over-unders at 52. Keenan Allen, wide receiver, 1 season. His 16-game pace right now, 196 targets, 128 receptions, 1,308 yards. Julio Jones-esque, 4 touchdowns. Hopefully we see that increase. But particularly with, Herbert under center, man, 10 targets, 19 targets, 12 targets last week. All the volume, and we saw last week, that catch he made on the sideline, Keenan playing better football than ever right now. Saints secondary last week, both Marshawn Lattimore and Janoris Jenkins were out. That's going to be a big-time problem, man, against Keenan. Maybe we see a floor game from Herbert eventually. Look, the guy's playing fantastic, and it's just one of these situations where, he's a rookie QB, and I just don't think he can keep playing this good every week, as good as he has. But, there's no real reason to expect a steep regression, particularly in a matchup against, again, a talented Saints defense, but banged up right now and certainly not playing their best football regardless. So, I think adding Mike Williams to the picture could actually be one of the situations that helps. Keenan is cemented as their number 1 guy anyway. If you have Mike Williams out there, I think he's going to pull a little more attention away than your Jalen Guytons, Tyron Johnsons of the world. No offense to those guys. They had awesome long touchdowns last week, but truly, Mike Williams, great talent. And I think seeing him out there is going to further help this offense. So, man, get healthy, Austin Ekeler, because, this Chargers offense was looking like a situation we'd have to avoid because of quarterback play, but with that no longer being an issue, man, actually seeing some exciting games from the Chargers, you love to see it. So, Andrew, what you got on the Saints?
So Latavius Murray does this thing every year where he just has, a pretty good game. He scores a couple touchdowns. Then we label him, all right, Latavius Murray, you can slide him in, RB3 flex play this week. But again, guys, he's the backup. He had a good matchup last week against the Detroit Lions, who don't have a good run defense. The Saints didn't have Michael Thomas. The Saints didn't have Jared Cook. So, of course, they were going to try to run the ball. And that's exactly what they did. But the thing is, Kamara ran pretty bad on his 4 carries inside the 10-yard line. He could have easily scored 3 touchdowns. He would have made everyone that played him in DFS that much happier, including myself. But Latavius Murray, he had 2 carries inside the 10, and he converted both of his into touchdowns. So again, got to tip your hat to him. He got the job done. But on the season, Kamara is still dominating those touches. And I just don't think banking on Murray doing it again, especially with the fact that, he's seen carries, but that's it. He's not used in the passing game. And the matchup is much harder against the Los Angeles Chargers. They haven't allowed any rushing touchdowns this year. They're the only team that has yet to allow a rushing touchdown to a running back. So again, you're going to fire up Kamara, but I just don't think that the opportunities are going to be there with Latavius Murray. Again, this doesn't mean that Latavius Murray is someone that you drop or anything like that, because he has value in case anything happens to Kamara. But I wouldn't be super confident with just sliding him in and be like, oh yeah, no, he'll just kind of do what he did last week.
Yeah, it's kind of like Chase Edmonds at this point where, again, if the starter goes down, we're talking sky high potential weekly RB1 fantasy. Otherwise, you're going to need to pick the right matchup. Probably nothing more than, again, that low floor flex play. So that's going to do it, everyone. Thank you for listening to Pro Football Focus Fantasy Football Podcast. Make sure you follow Andrew on Twitter at Andrew Erickson _. And Andrew, what else you got on the docket for the week?
Yeah, I got some more previews coming out. Got some stardom sit-em. Got some trade stuff. You got to trade Todd Gurley. It's just got to happen this week. And I think that being aggressive with trades is really a way to get advantage in your league, especially if you're sitting at 1-3, 0-4, and stop doing 1-for-1 trades. Those are just miserable. Put some more guys in, put some more thought in, and if you're the smarter person, the smarter player in your league, you just throw 5 guys versus 4. You get the better head of the deal if the other person can't figure out the values. So, don't do 1-for-1 trades. And yeah, that's what I'll sign off with.
Good stuff, man. Appreciate you coming on as always, and good stuff from me as always. So thank you all again for listening to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Ian Hartitz. He's Andrew Erickson. Until next time, take care, everyone.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.